All right, guys, for more analysis on the Iran war from a global perspective, we are joined for the first time, and I'm excited about this, by Glenn Diesen. He's host of the Glenn Diesen YouTube channel, which Sagar and I both watch quite routinely. He's also a professor of Russian international affairs, focuses on geoeconomics, conservatism, and the Greater Eurasia Initiative. Great to see you, Glenn.
Good to see you.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm a great fan of both of you.
Well, thank you. It's certainly mutual. I just want to start with your top-line view of this war, what it's about, and how it's going so far.
Well, I think it was quite evident that this war was always about regime change. And I think what we often underestimated was that regime change in Iran might also entail the destruction or balkanization of Iran. And I think this is quite evident because when everyone speaks of regime change, there is no replacement government in the rear, which can simply be put in with legitimacy. So either this would have to be, the Shah 2.0, rule with brutality, or the country would then just disintegrate into civil war between different factions. So I see this. I think this is important because it explains that this is not just a threat to the government of Iran, but also the country. So once Iran sees this as an existential threat, it shouldn't be any surprise that it reacts in this way, which is why many of my guests, both Americans and Iranians on the podcast, kind of predicted this well before the invasion, that if they're attacked, they will close the Strait of Hormuz rather quickly and just begin to attack all American bases in the entire region because this is a fight for survival. And I think this is one thing we left out when we sold this war as simply being about helping protester and liberating girls, because if this was simply the case, the Iranians wouldn't see this as an existential threat and they wouldn't respond in this way.
Right.
So I think this is just escalating more and more, and we're getting into some very dangerous territory, especially with the potential of the destruction of Karg Island. I think that's when all bets are off.
Glenn, I'm really curious, actually, for your view of the bigger geopolitical implications. So obviously, you're an expert with Russia and with Ukraine. You've been analyzing this war now for years. Now, we have watched, actually, oil climb to high prices. The Kremlin has been able to get some sanctions taken off their oil. They're massively enriching their war machine. I just saw that I think it's the Belgian prime minister came out yesterday and said maybe we should normalize relations with Russia. This is already having huge ripple effects across the globe. Tell us how you see that.
Well, this is part of the problem with the Iran war. That is, for 4 years, we tried to knock out Russia from the ranks of great powers, and it failed.
Right.
And especially when Trump took over a year ago, if we couldn't do it with the Americans, we can't do it without them. And nonetheless, the Europeans tried to keep it going. So the US is still involved, of course, with the intelligence, the targeting, logistics, also selling the weapons instead of necessarily providing them for free. But the idea for Europe was, if we just keep it going for a bit longer, then perhaps something would happen in Russia. Now, of course, the Iran war has major implications for the Ukraine war. The Ukraine war was already going very poorly. That is, there's a massive manpower shortage. So the Ukrainians don't have enough men. The US doesn't have that much weapon to send anymore. So it's a weapon shortage. And also there's an economic problem. So you end up with this situation where the Europeans want to buy weapons with money they don't have to buy American weapons, which don't exist, to arm Ukrainian soldiers, which are, also don't exist anymore. So it was always a huge problem. But now, of course, with the Iran war also entering, then there's even less weapons coming from the US, and the Europeans, the energy prices are now going from bad to worse, and they're preparing themselves for a complete economic meltdown. So it's not ideal to keep this war going. So I think there's some voices now who would like to see an end to the war. The problem is that the Europeans locked themselves into narratives of simply an opportunistic Russia wanting territory. They never recognized that this was an existential threat for Russia, which meant every time we escalated, the Russians would just respond in turn. So it's a little bit like the problem with Iran. We don't recognize the security concerns of our opponents, so we misjudge their policies and how they would respond to ours.
One of the rationales that has been offered sort of after the fact of why this war is happening, why this war is actually a smart strategic play for the U.S., is that since China gets a lot of their oil for Iran, this is going to be damaging to China. What do you think is the Chinese perspective of the Iran war and the likely impact on that country?
Well, they do get oil from Iran, so they don't care for any disruptions. And of course, if the US will be successful in regime changing Iran, either put in a government loyal to the US or the country disintegrates or turns into chaos, it would be bad for Iran. For China. But it can also go the other way. That is, if the United States now fails in this war, which seems more likely that it will, and part of the objectives of the Iranians is to expel the Americans from the regions, that is to not just destroy bases, but also make the Gulf states reach the conclusion that they will have more security without hosting US bases, then suddenly the US is no longer a key security provider in the Middle East. If it's not a key security provider, then some of the foundation of the petrodollar goes away. Why would they still then trade only in dollars, especially when they have new economic centers of power? And then if all of these petrodollars aren't recycled into the US, what would happen with the AI tech bubble, which is in direct competition, or in the AI competition with the Chinese? So there's a lot of things that can go wrong for the United States in this competition with China. But of course, if the US could seize control over these natural resources, again, this was very openly an objective in Venezuela, to take control of it, make sure they don't link themselves too closely to Russia and China, but also in the Middle East, as Lindsey Graham suggested. We're going to make a ton of money here. And obviously from the energy going to, well, whoever America wants to go to instead of China. So there is a lot more of a great power politics play going on here. And I think this is all, this is what ties the competition with China, Iran, Russia. We're living in a very historical time. We're seeing the end of the hegemonic era, which was established after the Cold War, and we're now seeing this transition into multipolarity. And at the moment, it's being pulled in both directions, which is a source of some of the more violent parts of our conflicts now.
One of the things I'm interested in, Glenn, here is to think, we've talked here about China, but I'm also curious for your view as to how this will play out in terms of history. And so you talked there about the end of the hegemonic era. We talked to Yanis Varoufakis earlier, and he said, I would be hesitant to say that this would be the immediate death of the American empire and compare it, let's say, to a Suez moment for the British. However, as I said, even at the time of Suez, nobody was like, this is the end of the British Empire. It's only in retrospect that we're able to look back and to see that. If you had that lens on and you were looking with the Iran crisis, but all of these other things, what would the specific timeline and events that you would look for to say definitively this was the beginning of the end?
Well, I also wouldn't go with the Suez Canal comparison, because Britain had very different fundamentals than the United States. The US is a massive power. It will remain so. Even if its economy would begin to collapse, it's going to recover. It's going to be a key player. So I wouldn't dismiss it as simply disappearing. Britain could disappear, but that's not the case with the United States. But I think it's a longer transition, and it's worth keeping in mind what the world order signifies. That is, what are the basic rules, which depends on how security is created. When you have the international system with all these large powers competing against each other, then the question is, what creates security? Well, usually it would be a pursuit of indivisible security, because if countries compete, that is, if United States builds some missiles, that's security for the US, but insecurity for China, and then China will respond, and we end up in this security competition. So usually peace is created if you recognize the security concerns of your opponents, and you try to elevate the common security, that is indivisible security. Well, after the Cold War, there was only one center of power, and the US promoted a different approach to security, which was the hegemonic peace, which means you don't have to take into consideration other centers of power. You only have one power, which dominates. And indeed, the more the US could dominate, the less any other countries, even coalitions, could aspire to challenge the US. This would be the source of security. So this was the liberal hegemon. One center of power, there's no more great power rivalry, and that hegemon is a liberal democracy, so it will try to transcend some of the uglier parts of former politics, so elevate the role of democracy and human rights. This was the main idea. It would be a benign hegemon. But of course, the key problem is over time, the hegemon will always exhaust itself. As we've seen, it's more debt, and also it depends on keeping other powers down. So eventually other centers of power would then figure out that they have to work together to balance the US. So you see institutions such as BRICS. Like, why would Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and Iran, all these other countries suddenly have a commonality? Well, of course, they want a different economic architecture, but they also want to balance the hegemonic aspirations of the United States. So I think these are the wider trends happening. And what I would look for would be some of the key crises we had. For example, the attempt to break China. This was a key part of this trying to restore hegemony, but it doesn't work. The Chinese are not just an industrial power; they're also a high-tech power. If anything, they can use their AI more to be implemented within industrial capacity, so they have more ability to make some revenue of their AI. We saw then with Russia, the objective under the Biden administration was to use the Ukrainians to try to knock out Russia, and then the US could focus on China. It didn't work, so Trump then instead tried to get Russia on our side of the ledger by improving relations, and to some extent the same applies for Iran. The assumption, if you can knock out Iran, you take out an important player at the southern end of the Eurasian continent. The problem is all of this tends to backfire. That is, if one goes after Russia, it will align itself closer with China. Now, the attempt to defeat the Iranians, they will link themselves closer to both Russia and China. And ideally, at some point, I think the United States will reach the conclusion what many people thought was America first, which is if the US just pulls back a bit, just aspire to be one among many great powers, it will be able to restore its domestic strength. And suddenly, if it doesn't have that big footprint on the Eurasian continent, then the Europeans, the Russians, the Iranians, the Chinese would begin soft balancing each other at least. But we're not quite there yet. I think there's still this efforts by the United States to restore its hegemony. But I think that the defeat in the Ukraine war and now likely defeat in the Iran war will more or less put an end to this.
My last question for you, Glenn, is we had Trita Parsi on, and he said, from the Israeli perspective, they feel that this war is going great, that this is all going exactly the way that they want it to go. They finally succeeded in getting a U.S. president to launch the war they've been pushing for years and years. Of course, blame still lies with Trump, but no doubt Netanyahu and others allied with him were making the case, and that ended up being persuasive to Trump. Do you view it that way, and how do you see the interests of Israel diverging from the interests of the United States?
Well, the Israelis aren't that different from the Europeans in this regard, because the Europeans also think that what's missing with the United States is not the capabilities. They still believe the United States has this infinite resources and capabilities to essentially defeat whoever they want. So the Europeans wanted simply, if America, we can bring them back into the war against Russia, then more directly, then we will win. And the Israelis more or less thought the same. That is, if we can just get the United States to attack Iran, yes, it might not succeed with the regime change, but in another long war, over time, the Iranians will be weakened, and hopefully the government can be toppled, and even possibly the country could be balkanized. So getting finally a US president after all these years, and they have talked about this war for many decades now, there's this opportunity to, as long as the US kept in the war, that they can knock out Iran eventually. Maybe not now, maybe in 5 years. But I guess here's where Israel and the US begin to diverge. That is, it's not in United States' interest, especially this critical time in history, because, as I said, the world is becoming multipolar. That's just a reality in terms of the international distribution of power, which means the US has to make priorities. And those priorities, as the national security strategy outlined, is to focus on the Western Hemisphere and East Asia. That's where America's peer competitor is, which means if you pivot to somewhere, you have to pivot away from somewhere. And that would be pivot away from Europe and the Middle East. And this is the key problem. This is why Trump has made a mistake, because the longer he remains in Europe, that absorbs American resources, but it also pushes the Russians further to China. And also in the Middle East, the longer it stays in Iran, the more it's going to divert its focus away from East Asia. Indeed, the US had to pull out its THAAD missiles and Patriots from South Korea to send to the Middle East. The whole point of pivoting to Asia was that it was supposed to go the other way. The weapons were supposed to be pulled out of Europe and the Middle East and sent to East Asia. So we're seeing everything going in reverse, and this was not in the strategic interest of Trump. This is not what the security strategy indicated. They were supposed to do the opposite. But now, of course, 1 year later, the US is still involved in the war in Europe, and they're also now doubling down in the Middle East. So I think this is a strategic mistake for the United States. The fact that they most likely won't win this either makes it even worse. So no, I think you're going to see this expressed more now in terms of divergence in the US, how they view Israel. What is America first? Is it the partnership with Israel or putting America before Israel? I think you're going to see more splits there now. And that's reflected in how the strategic interest of America is changing.
Absolutely. Glenn, you are such a great guest. We can't wait to have you back. And everybody go subscribe to Glenn's channel. He does such incredible interviews. We're going to have a link down in the description, and we really hope that people will go watch his content as well. So thank you very much, Glenn. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.